Welcome to the Growing Money with Sean podcast. I've got a great guest with me today, and we've already been diving in, and I had to stop because we were having a fun conversation and say, let's get this on video. But I'm back with an awesome guest. Now, can you tell people who you are and a little bit of what you do, and we can dive into that topic that you were just telling me.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. So nice to be with you. My name is Resa Shore. I am a money coach, which nobody usually knows what that is. My website is yourmoneyhealth.com, which gives you an idea that I like to help people with their money health. My background is a little bit diverse. I have an MBA. I worked in the business world for a very long time, in the corporate world for about 5 years, and then I started my own design firm, design and marketing. So I worked with large companies, and we designed packages, and it was a successful small business in relative terms. And then I stopped because I thought, I'm done this, and it's not exactly helping the world. I mean, I did a lot of really nice, good things, and I enjoyed it, but I felt like it was time for me to move on. And the financial coaching, the money coaching, is something that I've always wanted to do, but never did do it because I had a business and was successful doing that. So why change? I had employees. But then the time came in my life where I was making changes and decided this was the time. And for anyone who doesn't know what a money coach is, it is not a financial advisor. It is not a wealth advisor. It is not an accountant. It is not a bookkeeper. A money coach helps. What I do is I help people both with the emotional and the practical aspects of money management, everyday money management. So I'm not going to help you invest your money and make a fortune for the future. My goal is to help people who can't get out of debt, who don't know how to handle their money, who have emotional issues around money. Anyone, I think it says this on my website, if you can't sleep at night or money keeps you awake at night, those are the people that I help. And my goal is to get those people to the place where they could confer with a a wealth advisor or financial planner to plan for their retirement. But if you don't have your money act together, you cannot plan for your future. So I work with people on the practical aspects of money management and all of their background crap that they bring along with them that makes their life hard.
Right. It's so true. I was just like, I was loving what you're describing right there. And one of the things that we were talking about before we got started is like the idea of I have a very diverse background as well. And you were commenting on that. And I was pointing out that, at the end of the day, I just want to make an impact. And one of the areas that I was looking at for myself is, this podcast was precipitated by the fact that my then 6-year-old daughter was like, Daddy told me about money. And I had just finished my MBA, did it remotely, and I was like thinking that I'm going to have all this financial information, and I was just sitting there going, well, I still feel extremely lost, and I learned about numbers, I learned about business, I learned about all this, but yet this relationship with money was still sorely lacking. And I grew up with people that were always, not my mom, my dad a little bit, but there was this very negative attitude towards money in a lot of my upbringing. A lot of that money is the root of all evil.
Mm-hmm,
And it's just like, and then what I started seeing was that was in no way true. It was simply a tool, and it was an amplifier. When I saw people, if they were a good person inside, that the money would give them the ability to do good things. If they're a rotten person, that also would, give them that power to do it. And it's simply this powerful tool. And I had to start reshaping things. And I started reaching out to people who had interesting information and could share that. Now, talk to me about, you mentioned that our money beliefs are often shaped in childhood. How do you guide clients in uncovering and transforming these early beliefs? Like for me, mine was money is the root of all evil. And, and there wasn't this relationship with money. How do you help people figure out what are some of those beliefs and then start uncovering and getting at them?
Right. Yeah, I mean, and actually that belief that you're talking about is pretty common. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
people who, I work a lot with people who have small businesses, and just think about it. If you think that money is the root of all evil, or that, if you're wealthy, you're selfish and greedy.
Yeah.
Think about the impact on your business. Are you going to raise your rates when it's appropriate if you think it's evil and bad? So you sabotage yourself that way. So I think that the first thing that I do with people uh, is to just to talk to them about their background, because one of the most important
Yeah.
things is to identify what these beliefs are. What was your childhood like?
Yeah.
What were your parents' relationship with money? What did they tell you, if anything? Most people don't get told anything, really. Um,
Yeah.
but just to really start looking at the feelings attached to when they're spending. One of the things that, or the main thing that I start with clients is to get clarity around their money. That's like the key thing. If I could tell you what's the most important thing about money, it's getting clarity. So if I'm working with a client and we're looking at what they're spending and they're tracking and all that, um, it helps. It's a black and white way of knowing what's going on. Like if I'm working with a client and we're projecting their budget or their spending plan for the month, and they say, okay, I'll say, do you need clothes? Are you going to spend money on clothes? And they say, no, I don't need any clothes. Then they come back to me 2 weeks later and they're tracking what they spend, and they spent $500 on clothes. That
Right.
gives me an opportunity to say, what was going on there, because you said you didn't need clothes. And then we have a conversation about that. And we find out that they were having a really stressful week and they were fighting with their husband, or their boss was getting on their case, so they decided to stop at the store on the way home, or they were sitting at their computer at night online shopping because it made them feel better for the
Yeah.
moment. And so it's through actually behaviors that we often can find out what these emotions are. Some of it is just history. If, like you said, you can identify that your parents felt that money was evil. Some people have deprivation in their life. They didn't
Yeah.
have any money, and so actually it goes two ways. Some people become just spenders, like, oh boy, now I
Yeah.
deserve to spend money. And they get themselves into deep trouble because they're spending without thinking. And then other people, and I put myself in that category, and that's one of the reasons why I became so interested in this field. I grew up with my family where there wasn't a lot of money, and there was always, for me, there was always fear and anxiety around money because there
Yeah.
wasn't enough, but nobody talked about it. But it was just an awful feeling. Then I worked my way through college and I worked my way through graduate school, always worried about money. So I became the opposite. I just became like a saving lunatic. I was always so
Yeah.
fearful that, all I wanted to do was save money, because that to me was security. But that becomes obsessive and unhealthy also, because then you can't just live and spend money. Even if you can't do it in a joyful way. So all of those, there's so many different emotions that come up with people, that it comes up as you're working around the money on a practical basis, often.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you were talking about that. I remember this one movie, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of the movie, but it was this really special, really beautiful film set in the 60s for a family that owned a hotel outside of Woodstock. And it's this one kid, and his sister calls him and says, "Our parents' hotel is failing. Our parents are getting older. You got to go back." So he was living in New York City, and he kind of abandoned everything. He moved back out to be near his parents in the middle of nowhere. And what happened was, because money was a problem, he couldn't afford to keep doing what he was doing. And when he came back, without realizing, a Woodstock happened, and their farm, their hotel was perfectly positioned to make money from this wild
Hmm.
thing. And so, it was interesting because they were just pulling in money like crazy. And the main character's parents had gone through very difficult times, and toward the end of the movie, there's this scene where the mother kind of someone had given the mother, I don't know if it was an edible or something, and she kind of passes out, and she wakes up, and they find her, and she's woken up, and she's hoarded all of this money. And and the, and the son's like, well, what is this? I dropped out. I mortgaged my apartment so that I could come back here and help. And what was interesting, and why I bring that up, is because her her money personality was hidden. She hid it from
Hmm.
everyone. The money was
Hmm.
hidden, and it was very subconscious, seemingly even to her. It was an action
Right,
that she
right.
was going through, and I think that one of the things to me is, as I was starting to learn about different money personalities, and I was starting to look at, wow, just that light, shining a light on an area. I have a little table over here, and it is the dust collector. And I mop, I clean, and then what I'll notice is that I'll get down there. When I shine a flashlight under there, I'm like, wow, I missed a lot
Yeah,
of dust.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I just have to then get a light and really get under there. But if you don't have a light, if you're not able to shine a light into the darkness, if you're not able to illuminate things that are, hidden, you can't really fix the problem. And
That,
so,
yeah, that's exactly it. And one of the things that I find in my practice is very difficult for people to make the initial call to me. They might be
yeah,
suffering about money, but they are so fearful of talking about it, of dealing with it, and it's a real struggle. And I say to everybody, it's if you look at it, if you have clarity around it, if you identify what's going on, then you can develop strategies to fix it. But if you
yeah,
stick your head in the sand, eventually you're just going to suffocate yourself. And I have to say
100%.
that probably, I would say almost 100% of the people that I see will say to me afterwards, even after my first session with them, they'll say, "Oh my God, I feel so much better because it's out there."
Yeah,
Because when what there's a statement or something that stays in the dark, you know, gets harder or something like I don't remember the statement, but it's
yeah,
true. If you put it out there, then you think, okay, it's not even as bad as you thought it was, and
yeah.
so it's so important for people to talk about it. But you know probably from talking to all the people that you have, money's a taboo subject.
Yes,
People
it
don't
is.
talk about it.
Yep.
People don't talk about it. I have spoken in a room full of people where there's maybe 30 or 40 people, and if I say how many people knew how much money their parents made, nobody would raise their hand.
Yep.
Nobody. And it's like, why is that?
Yeah.
We should talk to our children. We should teach them. And what you're doing, I think, is wonderful because the way kids learn about money is role modeling. And when I have clients who really struggled, or they're having a difficult time financially, or they're even if they're not having a difficult time financially, but they're trying to get a healthier relationship with their money, I say talk to your kids. Say to them, we're
Yeah.
cutting back here so that we can do that, so that they have an understanding of what the process is to plan how to spend your money and how to prioritize it. And people
We,
tend not to do it.
right. We had and I'm trying to gamify it for my daughter, like, because she's been wasting time on things, and that's just kids being kids. I try to get her read and she fights, try to get her practice piano, she pushes back, but then, oh man, she
Mhm.
wants to play video games. So I made this game using AI, which is, I love ChatGPT. It helps make great worksheets for
Mhm.
kids, and it was a time value of money worksheet game. And we essentially, everything had a value assigned to it. You read, oh, you get 8 gold for reading for 30
Yeah, what
minutes,
a great idea. Yeah.
and it was able to, like, oh, you played video games, well, you lost 5 gold doing that because you could have been putting that into something else. And then after the game, she was like, so this is real, right? I said, yeah, like every time that we are, you're playing a video game. And then I also helped her understand that sometimes relaxing is important, but if you're doing
Right.
things too much, it can be bad. Now, can you share with me more? I was reading your website, and they said that there was this moment at a restaurant when you had an epiphany about your relationship with money. What was that? And how did it change
Yeah.
your approach?
Yeah. Well, as I said, I grew up with, there was a lot of stuff around money that was difficult, and there was a lot of anxiety and fear that I kind of grew up with, and I took it on. I took it
Yeah.
on, and so I was because I was responsible for kind of taking care of going to school and working my way through college, and I was always so uptight about having enough money. So my lack of money growing up turned into this fear of scarcity,
Yeah.
and so I always was so worried about that I was saving money and wouldn't spend money, and even after I started working and started earning a lot of money, I still continued along that same path. Instead of enjoying all the efforts that I put into working and earning money, and so I would continually do things like go to a restaurant, and if there was something I wanted that was like $5 more than something else, I thought, oh, and I don't want to spend that extra $5,
Yeah.
and then the more I thought about it, I mean, it was kind of in the back of my mind. But then one time I was at this restaurant and I wanted something, and I started to do the same thing of, oh, I shouldn't get that. And I thought, whoa, what am I doing? This is
Yeah.
insanity. It's $5. I've got like $100,000 in the bank. What am I doing? And it was just this epiphany, like, whoa, this is crazy stuff. And
Yeah.
that was kind of the beginning of me really taking a deep, deep dive into my own personal background. I knew that I had issues around it, but I hadn't really put a lot of energy into exploring it and analyzing it. And that's when I started doing my own work and research and understanding about how money and how money scripts, call them money scripts, impact people as they become adults. And I think the best statement that I found was that beliefs are not truths. You can believe
Ah,
something. I can believe that I won't have enough, but that doesn't mean it's true. And we all have beliefs, and those are the money scripts we get from childhood, where we integrate them into our psyche when we're young,
yeah.
because our brains are developing, and then we spend the rest of our lives living that way, even if it's no longer true. We do that with a lot of things, but money happens to be one of them. And so that was when I began to work on taking a more cognitive approach to how I was looking at money. What's realistic? What's not realistic? Um, and that was before I became a money coach, but that was one of the things that was always in the back of my mind, that I would really love to help people do that. I have this one example of a client which is similar. It takes off of this same kind of the scarcity thing. But one of my clients she had a lot of money. She had 2 residences. She had probably the equivalent of $5 million in the bank. But she had that Depression era mentality. Her parents grew up in the Depression, always worried that there wasn't enough money. And she took that on. But then she was married for a long time, and her husband helped her kind of be more sane and realistic about the whole thing. But when he died, she just defaulted back into that fear mode.
Yeah.
And I actually was seeing her because she knew that it was an unhealthy relationship with money, and that's why she was meeting with me. But she came into my office one day and just in a frantic state because her sink had backed up, her kitchen sink, and she tried to use the plunger and stuff, and she finally got it out, but she was just terrified that it was going to be broken. And I said to her, I said, well, did you call the plumber? She goes, well, no, it's $150 for the plumber to come out. And I know that she regularly had about $10,000 in her checking account just as a cushion. She didn't even need it,
Yeah.
And so I had to sit with her and say, okay, let's look at this. You have $10,000 in the bank as a cushion, and you're going to spend $150 for the plumber. So how much money will you have left in your account?
Right.
I mean, we literally have to go to, okay, you'll have $9,850 or whatever it was in your account. Is that enough just to be sitting there? So when I have people like that, you have to really work through it from a cognitive standpoint, because if the emotions are so strong that left to just the emotions, people can't make the changes. So you've got to discuss with them the reality of the situation.
I love that. It's interesting because when a lot of people hear the term financial freedom, they think of having enough money to be free. But the reality is that someone can have a lot of money and still not be financially free. That there is this, you can be, it's about the mindset of being in a healthy relationship with your money. It's about the mindset of going, if you don't have enough and you have a mindset of being able to manage things to get your freedom, or if you have enough, relative terms, enough, whatever that is for you, and then you have to create that way forward. But what are some of the most common money myths or misconceptions you see holding people back from financial freedom?
Well, I think one of the main ones is what I hear from a lot of people is that I can't do it. I can't
Oh,
manage it. I'm not good with money. I'm just not good with money.
right?
And I would say 99% of the people that I end up working with are fine with money. I mean, because
100%.
really, I mean, I don't want to downplay what I do, but it is brain surgery. Money, numbers and money. It's not that complicated. It's not
Yeah.
complicated math. It's like you spend 100, you make 1,000, and then it's not that
Yeah.
hard. But if people just think they can't do it, so that's number
Yeah.
one, and they just haven't tried. They
Hmm.
also feel like if they budgeting is a bad thing because budgeting means they have to deprive themselves
Yeah.
and they have to sacrifice and they can't live the way they want to live. And that also is not true because that ties with what you were just saying, is that financial freedom isn't having more money. Financial freedom is having a healthy relationship with your money.
Yes.
And in fact, that's probably the next myth. More money will make you happy. If I have
Yeah.
more money, then everything will be okay. And I mean, I can tell you for a fact, I have worked with people with a lot of money, and they have less money in their savings. They have more anxiety around their money than someone who's making a tenth of what they make. So it's not about how much money you have, it's what you do with your money.
I love that.
Yeah.
one of the things too that you pointed out, that people think that they're not good with stuff. I was going to the gym with my wife, and she grew up in a culture that was not very sports oriented, and it always was told you have to do this, you have to be this as a woman, especially. And one of the things we realized after going to the gym, she was just built different. And she should have been like either a gymnast or an MMA fighter, because she is just strong and she loves it. And, we go to boxing class together and she's just like,
Mhm.
she loves it. But the funny thing is like, for so long before she tried it, she's like, I'm not good at that. I can't do that. I
Right,
wouldn't, and it's just something she gets in there and she's like, wow, this is not as hard as I thought. And granted, like, certainly it takes time to learn new skills. It takes time to figure things out. But if you give yourself time, there was a guest I had that came on the other day that was talking about overconfidence when investing. And he said it was an interesting thing, and one of the things that he said to be careful of when investing was overconfidence. But there was one of the points that he said that I was just like, afterwards, I kept thinking about that and thinking about that, because he said, if you ask the average person, are you a better driver than everyone else? Most people will say yes, even though they might not be. And then I was thinking, yeah, that's right. But then all of a sudden I thought about it later on. And I got to this point of like, I want to have him back on someday to ask him this question, because if you train and you learn certain tools and you learn certain things, you can be a better driver than other people. You can get there. And so
right.
it's like, so certainly overconfidence is dangerous. Overconfidence without skill, without learning, without education is dangerous. But confidence that is grounded in good, solid information is a great thing. We all want to be confident in our finances. We want to be confident in our next steps forward. But one of the dangers is that I think people go to start learning about this, and we get lit up, we get triggered, and we sit there and go, okay, that's enough for
Mhm.
today, and we step back. And I mean, I think for me, anxiety and a feeling of overwhelm was something that for a long time kept me from looking at my finances more holistically. But when I had my daughter, and there was this realization that, you know what, I need to get my house in order. I owe it to this little one right here, because I don't want my mistakes becoming setbacks for her, you know?
Right, and I think that's a key thing. What you just said is a key thing, is that you have to have the commitment and the desire to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Just like going to the gym. Like if you go there and start lifting weights and getting on a treadmill and you try to do it for an hour the first time, you're going to hate it and it's not going to work and you're never going to do it again. But if you really want to do it, you go and you do 10 minutes the first time and then you build up to it but you've got to have the commitment to keep doing it. And that's the
Yeah.
same thing with money. If you want to resolve the anxiety and have a better relationship with money, you just need to do it. And
Yeah.
and kind of eliminate that fear of, oh my God, I'm going to end up not being able to live the life I want to do. A lot of people also, when they realize that they might have, the word budget seems to just freak everybody out. It's like, budget. And I think that to them means, oh, that I can't do what I want. But with my clients, we create a spending plan based on how much it costs for them to live, based on what their income is. And part of what I do with them is track what they spend. And I get so much pushback in the beginning. It's always really fascinating. I get so much pushback in the beginning because people just don't want to do it, but it requires that commitment to do it. But I
Yeah.
find I've had more clients say to me, like 2 months into it, oh my gosh. And these are people who like didn't want to do it and were really like, ugh. Um, and then 2 months later, they're saying, if I don't do it, I get really stressed. I'm so much better and I feel so much comfort. I'm in control of my finances, I know. And if I miss a week of tracking, and I don't know where I'm at. Now I feel anxious. So
Yeah.
it's just it's kind of like if you go to the gym and you get used to it, and then you have to miss it, you feel crappy. Um,
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of making a commitment that you want control in your life around your finances, and the most important thing is, I think you said, financial freedom. The truth is, if you're in control, if you know how much money you're making, if you know how much money you're spending, if you have priorities, then you have financial freedom. Financial freedom
Yeah.
doesn't mean I can buy anything I want. I'm going to go buy a Mercedes. I'm going to go do this. No, financial freedom means that you have a chance to evaluate the priorities in your life, the goals in your life, and you work toward building your financial life around that. And if you don't take control of your finances and have a healthy relationship with it, then you never get that freedom. You're always anxious. You're always going to be stressed out and anxious and be in debt and all of that.
Hmm. Well, how do you help people that come in that are feeling overwhelmed? Because I mean, I remember when I was a kid, there was this hill behind the school that my sister studied at, and they would back in the 80s, they would line the hill with these rocks and write the year of the graduation year, 84 or something, on the wall. And I remember once trying to climb that hill, and it was terrifying because I was sitting there looking up, and I could see the big people starting to climb it, but for me and my little legs, it was tough. And I felt overwhelmed, and I didn't believe that I could climb that wall. I did not believe that I could get up there. How do you help people who feel overwhelmed by debt start believing that financial freedom is possible? How do you get
Mhm.
them to see this is something that you can accomplish?
But it's actually coincidental because I have an appointment today with somebody, and that's exactly what happened. This is somebody that co- contacted me about a year ago, knew of me, and contacted me about a year ago. So anxious, so worried about her money, and she wanted to do something about it, but she was just paralyzed with fear about it.
Yeah.
And I'd say, well, just give me a call whenever you're ready. And finally, I said to her, don't let just let's just sit down and talk. Let's just sit down and talk.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's just start out in baby. And that's the thing, baby steps. I'm not asking you to show me every single thing that you've ever spent money on, or we're not going to create a budget. Let's just sit down and talk about your finances, what you're concerned about. And so that's usually how I start with people is, what's going on with you? Because the truth is, most people are so relieved to talk to somebody about it because they've held it inside for so long. And usually the fears are unfounded, but
Yeah.
but they're not able to share it because, as I said, money seems to be taboo. You're not going to sit down with your friend, for coffee and say, "Oh my God, I'm got so much money in credit card debt. I don't know what to do
Right.
about it." You don't. People don't talk about it. So once somebody is able to talk to me and kind of relieve some of the pressure, and then we start. It's that clarity piece that I was talking about. We just start putting together, a sheet of clarity. How much
Yeah.
money are you earning? How much money are you spending? And slowly over time, we get total control over what's happening in their life. And then they feel like they're in control because I can say to them, okay, well, it looks like, you're spending $500 more than what you're bringing in. Okay, what can we do about that? Let's look and see. Is there anything that you can cut in your expenses?
Yeah.
If so, then let's see if we can cut that down. If Is there a way for you to earn another $500? So it becomes just very simple math at that point,
Yeah.
and then they are able to make decisions. One time I had I had this couple, and as I work a lot with couples, which is a whole nother deal, but um, she had quit her job because she had a baby. She had a couple older kids, but she had this baby, and she wanted to stay home with the baby, and they didn't have enough money, and so they didn't know exactly where they were at. She just knew they didn't have enough money, and she was so upset and so anxious because she felt like she had to make the decision to either go back to work or get into debt. So
Mm-hmm.
once we actually went through that process of looking to see, well, how much money do you actually need if you want to stay home? And it really was just about $500 or $600 a month that they would need extra for her to stay home and the husband to keep working. And she said, "Oh, well, I could do that. I could babysit or I could do whatever." And so she came up with a solution almost
Yeah.
immediately. And yet she'd spent months and months living with this horrible anxiety just because she
Yes.
wasn't clear about what the situation was.
You hit the nail on the head with that. I was today. My daughter, just before bed, got upset about something, and she threw something. And when she threw it, I was like, "Do you feel better now?" And she's like, "Not really." And when she threw something, something popped out of her bag, and a red marker went all the way down her new uniform for school. And she was like very upset about that. That she was like, "Oh, I'm so stupid." I was like, "No, you're not stupid, but you'll let your emotions get out of control. And when those emotions start expressing themselves, you can't react in a way that's going to get you the outcome you want. It's going to probably be a knee-jerk reaction, whether it be fear, whether it be I've seen it with studying martial arts for a long time. When you get into one of the things that I love about martial arts and why I'm teaching them to my daughter as well. I studied Muay Thai for a long time, and I'm a black belt in Jiu-Jitsu. And one of the only things that I've hardly gotten into any fights in my life, but I am always really good at when stuff hits the fan. When bad things
Mhm.
start happening, I just kind of keep my cool. And I sit there and see I have all this stuff going on around me. I remember when I was younger in college, and we were on a hay ride, and suddenly the wagon unhitched with about 25 kids in the back in the wagon in the truck, and it started going down the hill like this, just sliding until we hit a tree. It was really freaky. And then when we hit the
Yeah.
tree, everyone was freaking out. People were screaming and crying. And suddenly I just said, "All right, everyone, we have no lights. We're in the most dangerous place we can be by sitting on this road. So let's get everyone out of the trailer and up off of the road and away from where other cars might be able to hit us." And it was interesting because afterwards, a couple friends came up to me and said, "How did you do that? How did you do that?" And I said, they're like, I was so afraid. And I was like, I was terrified too. But I had to sit there and tell my fear, not right
Right,
now.
right.
Not right now. We
And
can be
we do
afraid.
have some control over our emotions. What you're saying is true. We feel things viscerally, but that doesn't mean we have to act on them.
Yeah. How do you help your clients navigate the emotional side of money? Because it is such a big part of it.
Hmm. Just as I was saying, is that I try to give them tools
Yeah.
to, like, I have my 24-hour rule
Oh,
for
what's this?
people. Okay, so some people just, it's like any other addiction, compulsive spending, compulsive shopping. Um, when things go bad, someone's depressed or someone's unhappy or someone's angry, they will want to spend money or go shopping.
Yeah.
And I say 24-hour rule. If you're going to buy something, you look at it and you say, okay, I can come back in 24 hours if I still want it. But you can't buy it right then.
I love that.
And probably 100% of the time I would say they don't go back and get it. But it makes them stop and think about, well, why am I buying this? I mean, because compulsive spending is a whole another deal. I mean, that's a very complex thing, but that's a big part of it, is that you're responding just with emotions. Or,
Yeah.
like I said in the example that I gave you with the plugged sink, I have people stop, think about what's going on for them, check in with their feelings, and then
Yeah.
cognitively go through it. It's like,
Yeah.
well, is this something that I need? And another huge concept for me is needs and wants. Okay, that's a
Yes.
big thing. When it comes to money, it's in, red letters, very big, needs and wants. Because if it's something that we need, that's one thing. But if we want something, that's a whole nother way of thinking about it.
Yes.
If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling unhappy, whatever, and you go want to buy something, you got to stop and say, do I need this versus
Yeah.
do I want this? 'Cause needs are something that you need to survive with, wants are extra. So I go through, just talking with them about that kind of thing and then they have to learn to check in with themselves.
I had I was teaching needs versus wants to my daughter the other day. And it was one really interesting because she wasn't getting it. Everything was a need. Everything was a need. And
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
that wasn't a need. So finally I had to sit there and go, I really need to reframe this. And so I put on about, she's young, so I didn't play it too long, but I put on a little bit like 5 minute clip of a zombie movie. I don't know if it was World War Z or Walking Dead or something. And I said, and she was like, so freaking out, terrified. And I said, okay, now we have our new game. So I printed out the checklist. All right, zombies have taken over the city, and you can only take 10 things in your backpack. What would you put in your backpack? And so she listed some different things, and like, and I had, I ChatGPT had it generate some different options so she could see, and she's like, one of the things that was in there was like a selfie stick, and the other thing was her Nintendo. And I was like, do you really need a selfie stick
Yeah.
right now? Well, I think I might want to take some video. I was like, are you sure? And so and finally I got her to see, might not. I said, you don't have any food in there. Oh, well, I'm going to need food. Yeah, I would think you would need some food. And then she got some other stuff done. And then we got to the end and I said, you do know that you don't have any clothes. So you're going to be fighting zombies naked, right? Oh, I can't be naked. So she had to, and then what she eventually came to was a very common list of general needs that a person has. And then what she allowed for was she had 8 needs, and then she had one want and one concept, which I was really proud of her for this one. And it was the one want that she had for fun and entertainment was her Nintendo. And I was like, okay, I'll give you that. I don't know where you're going to charge it. We're not getting into those logistics, but okay. And then finally she says, I need one more thing. I was like, what is that? And she said, I need hope. And I was like,
Oh
wow.
my gosh. Yeah.
That's a really great thing to say. And I said, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not something that's going to fit into your bag, but definitely something that would be helpful. But it was
Yeah.
interesting because it took an absolute reframing and putting it into a much more like fight or flight type of a place to say, what is it that you really need? And she was actually saying afterwards, she's like, well, you don't need that much. There's a ton of wants out there. There's a lot
Hmm.
of wants that I have. And I said, your bedroom is full of a lot of wants that were not needs, toys that you
Well,
will never play with.
that's such a great exercise for her because that's really a concept that's actually surprising to me that a lot of people have a hard time with.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I'll say, yes, you need a car. You do need a car because you need to drive to work. You don't need one that's $90,000.
Yeah.
You need a car. and it is hard for them to kind of define a need separate from the little extra want part of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I think that's so great because I think people get into so much trouble because they can't define for themselves what's a need. A
It
lot of
is
wants, a lot of wants end up on credit cards.
100%. And it's kind of
Yeah.
funny too, because you're sitting there talking to someone, you're like, okay, I had a friend and he was talking to me about buying a car, and he was wanting to buy a car in Vietnam where they have like double the price because it's like 100% tax. Everything that's imported has this huge tax on it. So $20,000 Honda costs $40,000. And
Mm.
so he was looking at Honda, Toyota, and a BMW. And I said, what's your income place? Where are you guys at financially? And so he was like, well, I'm not making much. I'm getting my business going. So I was like, okay, so what you're telling me is I need you to say this with me, Toyota. And he's like, BMW. And I was like, no, 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 no. You got that part wrong there. And it was just, and he ended up getting what he wanted, but then he came back to me. And I mean, not judging, but which car is better than another? But where he was at in that moment, he was not at this place. He was here.
Right,
And
right.
he couldn't even see it, even after we looked at it and
Yeah,
talked about it and discussed it and looked at the specs on all the cars. And he was like, no, I need the big flashy car that.
yeah. That's an
And
interesting thing. Cars seem to be one of those things that I consistently see when I first work with a client, and we go through all of their expenses and all that. And I'm always amazed at the number of people who have these huge car payments
yeah,
compared to their earnings. And at the time, I just don't think they just think, well, I need this car, and that's a nice one, and yeah, it's
yeah,
big, and but because it's an $800 car payment, they just don't. I don't know. They think, well, yeah, but I need to do that because I need that car. I want.
right.
They need the car, but they don't. They want the car.
And it's interesting too because a lot of people don't understand that the auto industry is a really interesting thing. Like there's all these cars that are made that are the exact same car, but they just have a different outside
Right.
covering. Like
Right.
I believe it's like the VW. There's a VW SUV that is the same as the Audi. That is the same as the Porsche. They're literally the same car. It's just a little few minor tweaks. And I had
Well,
my
oh, I'm sorry. Go
no, no,
ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, it's just going to say that this is where we get into these cultural influences
Yes.
that is so problematic that people have to have a bit of a more practical, independent streak. It's like you need a car, and I always say, drive the car until it dies,
Yep.
because you don't need to buy a new car. But so many people, their identity seems to be caught up in, having a particular kind of car or a new car, even if it impacts them so negatively in their financial health. But there's so many of those cultural things that go on. Cars are, an easy one.
Well, and I also think though that as you dive into this, and I think that as a financial coach, money coach, you're going to be looking at some of this as well. People don't necessarily know who they are. They have these things that help them feel like they're defining themselves. And you see this so much where I'm the this person's like, my father-in-law is an interesting one. He is a Honda guy. He rides Honda motorcycles. And in America you'll see like a Chevy truck guy, a Ford guy, or the people are like,
Mm-hmm.
this is my identity. Like this vehicle is my identity. But no, you're Tom. And Tom, you don't have to be defined by X, Y, and Z. You're just
Right.
you. And I think that it's a really healthy place that people can start separating themselves out from their belongings. And part of this journey of learning about your finances is to see, I'm Sean. Nice to meet you. I'm not defined by what's in my wallet. I'm not defined by my clothes. I'm defined by my actions. I'm defined on by what I
Mhm.
put out into the world, and I think that there has to be this mental shift that happens for people. I don't
Well,
know
I
if
think
that's
what
easy or not.
happens, yeah, I don't think it's easy, but it's a process. Just like
Hmm.
getting your hands around your finances and figuring all this out. I always tell my clients, if you're not willing to put a few months of heavy work into this, don't even bother because it takes a while. But
Yeah.
going through this process of looking at your kind of emotional baggage around it, or just learning how to use your finances, just learning what it means to live below your means, all of that. I think as you do it in your pursuit of a healthy relationship with your money, you start learning more about yourself. I mean, all of
Yeah.
that starts to happen because you can't go through this and become healthier around your money without getting healthier around your own psyche and around your own emotions. So it has a
100%.
long ranging effect on your life. It helps you to, um, your relationship with your significant other or your children. I mean, particularly when it comes to couples, that's a really complex, difficult thing. And I work a lot with couples. But here, we're talking about you're coming to your money situation with your own baggage, and then your spouse has their own
Yep.
baggage, and then you got two people, and who knows how screwed up all that can get. And if you don't communicate, which most people don't, and don't talk about money, then you end up in so much conflict or so much resentment, and um, that is so critical to learn to communicate and be honest and straightforward about money so that your relationship can continue to grow. Money's an intimate topic for people,
Yeah.
and if you're going to have an intimate a relationship with your significant other, you've got to be straightforward and honest with it. And same with your kids. Like I'm so happy to hear what you're doing with your daughter, but by not talking about things with your children, they don't learn. They don't
Yeah.
learn. Even and this is people even if you have a lot of money. Um,
Yes.
I say I have one of my clients, a very wealthy person who is way screwed up with his money, but he has a lot of money, made a lot of money, he's gotten way, way better, he's changed his whole life. But with his kids, and they have enough money where they can pretty much do what they want. But his daughter was going to go shopping. His wife was going to take her shopping, and I said, no, "You decide how much money is a reasonable amount of money for school clothes this year for your daughter, and you give her that much money." She was 14. It's like, okay, and you say, "Here's how much you have,
Yeah.
and you have to figure out how to spend it." And he came back to me and was like blown away because she started being really careful, and it was such a positive influence for him to do that with her.
Yeah.
And the kids have become very much more responsible with money since he started working with me and doing that kind of thing with his kids. So I think it's so important for people to work on the relationship with their money to make their life happier. And if you have kids, it's just kind of a responsibility to give them
Yeah.
a healthy outlook on it as well.
Well,
So,
my daughter was telling me, Daddy, what career should I have? What's gonna? And I kept coming back to one thing. I said, Ailani, you can take any career you want, but what we're gonna try to teach you is how to make money at it, how to be financially free in that job. If you want to be an artist, great. Well, how can you make money as an artist? You want to be a doctor?
mhm.
Great. Well, how can you treat people, feel happy in your career and profession, and also make sure that you're financially taking care of yourself? And I think that just talking to her about these concepts so that she can feel that money is a healthy, safe thing to talk about is something that I'm working on cultivating. It is one of the things that you talked about with couples. I had a friend. that was having a really tough time in their marriage. And one of the things that was interesting is later on the marriage started getting better, and I talked to that person. I said, "Well, what happened?" And he said, "I thought that I had marriage problems." And I said, "Oh, you didn't?" He says, "No. My marriage was fine, but we had money problems. And the money
Mm,
problems were causing heat in the relationship. It was like the temperature got turned way up.
mm-hmm.
And when that temperature gets turned up, a little sound can become the thing that, breaks the camel's
Right,
back. And
right.
so you're right. Communication is so important.
Oh yeah, because I've seen people who've been married for 25 years who do not talk about money, and in 25 years, I can tell you, resentments can build,
Yeah.
and I mean, and it happens just because they're not communicating, or they're not honest. They're not. I mean, uh, a relationship is a partnership, and your financial life is an important facet of it. So you have to treat your financial life in such a way as teamwork, as a joint effort. And
Yeah.
when you do that, then of course you might have to compromise, but you might need to, be patient and see what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. If your significant other has that fear-based, I don't want to spend money, we got to save it, and you happen to be someone that's like, yeah, let's have fun. Life is let's
Yeah.
just spend, and then that's going to cause friction. But you have to be able to be empathetic and understand that that other person isn't just being combative with you, but that other person is really fearful, and this is
Yeah.
why they're fearful, because they were raised without any money or whatever. You have to be able to have those kinds of intimate conversations, and once both partners understand where the other one's coming from, that's when you can compromise, or be able to develop priorities and goals together. But
Yeah.
it takes an effort, and it takes understanding. So yeah, it's not that easy.
It's a journey. If you
It
could
is
go
a
back in
journey.
time and if you could go back in time and give yourself, your younger self, one bit of financial advice, what would it be?
Don't worry so much.
Right.
Don't worry so much. Just be practical and don't worry so much. Honestly, that's for me. But I think for anybody else, I would give them the advice of be in control of your money, have clarity, understand what you actually have and what you need, and make sure that you're always on top of that, because otherwise that worry is going to be just free floating anxiety. You're just going to
Yeah.
always be worried. But you can be in control and stay in control of your money, and it will make life so much better.